Austin Scott. Congressman, thanks very much for being here today. Your thoughts on the inflation story, supply chain issues, all combining really to see Americans in pain.
Yeah, it's the cost of energy, which translates into higher costs for everything. It's the cost of groceries. Maria, I was a small business owner yesterday, and he told me that he'd seen a noticeable reduction in traffic in the last 4 to 6 weeks, and spoke with a banker at a graduation event on Saturday, and he told me that they were starting to see an uptick in late payments. And so I asked him about a recession, and his answer was that he thought the recession was already here, Maria, and we just don't know it yet. And if you look at what's happening with sales at the retail stores on discretionary spending, it's going way down, and that's because the basic necessities are eating up more and more of what Americans have to spend on a daily basis.
Congressman, I know that the Secretary of State is reporting more Georgians went to the polls during the 2022 primary elections early voting period than ever before. You've got a major primary day tomorrow. What can you tell us ahead of it?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, I think that if you follow the polls, I mean, it certainly appears that the governor will get reelected. It appears that we will have a candidate for U.S. Senate without a runoff. And then you'll see some runoffs in some of the U.S. House races. But I think the interesting thing here, Maria, is of all the whining and crying that the Democrats did, that you've actually seen an uptick in the total voter turnout. And so the election laws that were passed this past year made it easy to vote and hard to cheat. And it was a little, well, I don't want to use the word lie, but it was a clear misrepresentation from Stacey Abrams and Joe Biden and their allies in the press that what was done in SB 202 was going to actually hinder people's ability to vote. You look at the numbers, and what they said was absolutely false about the piece of legislation.
Yeah, no, it's a great point to make. What about November's election? Stacey Abrams has been the one, upset and making comments about all of that. What are you expecting in the midterms? Should the governor win the primary?
Yeah, I think I do believe the governor will win the primary, and I think that Georgians are going to go to the polls in mass numbers, just as they're going to go to the polls in mass numbers throughout the country, and they're going to reject the failed policies of the Democratic Party. You know, Maria, nobody in the Republican Party could have done as good a job of explaining to the American citizens how the Democrat economic policies will fail them as Joe Biden and the left-wing faction of the Democratic Party have done over the last several months. And so I think the voters are going to go to the polls. I think they're going to reject Stacey Abrams. She's somebody who absolutely wants to unionize the public school systems.
Okay.
I think the one silver lining in COVID is we got to see what our kids were being taught by some of the radicals in the unions and the school systems. And I think the people in Georgia are going to reject that.
Well, the latest issue, of course, is the baby formula shortage. Biden says a second shipment of baby formula will soon touch down in Pennsylvania after more than 70,000 pounds of formula arrived in Indiana from Europe yesterday. This is part of Joe Biden's Operation Fly Formula, his plan to ship formula to the U.S. from overseas. Abbott Labs is out with an op-ed with the CEO apologizing, saying we're sorry to every family we've let down since our voluntary recall exacerbated our nation's baby formula shortage. Congressman, what do Georgians think about this?
Well, number one, it just shows you how vulnerable we are to supply line disruptions. And when President Trump ran on America First, I think he saw that. And when he said America First, it doesn't mean only America. It means that when you have the foundations of your basic necessities, where you have allowed yourself to become dependent on a very few companies, and in some cases companies that are controlled from outside the United States, that simply is not going to work for the American citizens. And so I think the FDA and the president bear some responsibility here because they say they knew, and yet they did absolutely nothing. And so if there was a problem, obviously it should have been investigated. I don't know that a good risk management calculation was done where they looked at the actual outcome of the supply lines if they shut that factory down. So I think the Biden administration owes people a great explanation of what they did and why they did it, and how they analyzed it. Actually, shutting down the factory was in the best interest of the majority of Americans. And so, again, we need more diversity in the supply lines. We need to make sure that our basic necessities, those foundations, are anchored right here in the United States of America. And we've got a long way to go to get there, Maria.
Congressman, we'll be watching all of this obviously on the ballot in the primaries as well as the midterms. We'll take a look. Congressman Austin Scott, thanks very much for being here this morning and talking to us from Georgia. Quick break, and then we're taking you to the